Nicole, thank you so much for joining me. Before we get started, could you briefly explain your role within Amtivo and how you're involved with ISO 14001, please?
Hi, Izzy. Thank you for having me. I'm a product scheme manager at Untivo. I've got responsibility for how we interpret and implement all the management system standards across our group, including ISO 14001. In practice, that means overseeing our ISO 14001 scheme rules, supporting the auditors, auditor competence and guidance around the competence, and leading our approach to standard revisions, such as the transition from ISO to 14001 2015 to the ISO 14000 2026 version.
So, in my last interview with James Gibb, we discussed the upcoming ISO 14001 2026 revision and what we know so far. So, ISO 14001 2026 isn't actually a full scale revision, it's a set of consolidated amendments centered around finessing the language used in the standard. When I spoke with James, the timeline was that ISO 14001 2026 would be released in the first half of 2026. The key takeaway for businesses when I spoke to him in December 2025 was to avoid panicking and wait for more information to be released. Now that ISO 14001 has moved into its next stage, I'm talking with our resident expert, Nicole, all about it. As a refresher, Nicole, what is the FDIS and why is it so important to a standards revision process?
The FDIS, which is known as the Final Draft International Standard, is the last formal draft of an ISO standard before it's published as a new edition. At the FDIS stage, the technical content is essentially fixed. The only minor editorial edits are expected, and a positive ballot takes the document straight to publication. That's why the FDIS is actually so important to the revision process. It gives organizations confidence that what they see in the FDIS that gets released is what will appear in the final standard. So they can start planning changes without worrying about the requirements and that they will move again.
Okay, so the FDIS for ISO 14001 2026 has been released. What happens now?
Right, so the FDIS has been released. We're now in the early transition phase, so the direction of travel is actually set, and publication will be the next stage. At Amtivo, we're using this window to update our ISO 14001 scheme, refine our procedures, complete auditor training, so we're ready to deliver the transition audits as soon as the standards is published. We'll be communicating proactively with our clients about what's changing, how the transition will be managed in audits, and the key dates that they need to plan for. For ISO 14001 2015 certified organizations, this is the time to dig into the FDIS, so climate resilience, biodiversity, and environmental governance are far more prominent, so it's important to identify where their EMS might be strengthened. Clients don't need to change their certificate yet, but they can absolutely start preparing, updating their risk and opportunity thinking, reviewing aspects and impacts, briefing top management, and building the transition into upcoming surveillance and recertification audits.
Now that the ISO 14001 FDIS is released, what are the timelines we're currently working towards?
Right now, the key milestones are the publication of the ISO 14001 2026 version. It is expected to be published around the 15th of April 2026, and a 3-year transition period follows from that date. Current guidance indicates that the transition window will run roughly for 3 years after publication, taking us to around April 2029 for all the ISO 14001 2015 certificates to migrate to this new 2026 version. For most organizations, that means, keep up with your certification for 2015. Um, you know, don't stop. keep going, start aligning your EMS with the 2026 version requirements through the routine surveillance, the recertification audits that are coming up, and make sure you complete a successful transition audit before the end of the 3-year window so that your 2015 certification doesn't lapse.
You've studied the FDIS, Nicole. What does it tell you about ISO 14001:2026?
So the FDIS tells us this revision is a targeted strengthening of the environmental management system standard. It's not just a cosmetic refresh. It raises the bar on climate awareness, biodiversity, life cycle responsibilities, supplier oversights, and environmental governance. So organizations will need to reassess how environmental decisions are made. In practical terms, the FDIS for the 14001:2026 version confirms that the environmental conditions, value change impacts, and leadership accountability now sit at the heart of credible EMS, which is exactly what regulators, investors, and stakeholders are looking for.
Does the FDIS confirm that ISO 14001:2026 is an evolution of the 2015 version rather than a fundamental rewrite?
Oh, absolutely. The FDIS makes it clear that the 2026 version is the evolution of the 2015 version. So building on existing framework rather than ripping it up and starting again. The core structure, clause sequence, and intent remain familiar, but requirements are just sharpened around climate change, biodiversity, life cycle thinking, and value chain control. Organizations will feel a step up in expectations rather than a completely new system.
Are there any themes or clarifications that stand out to you in the final draft?
So, three big themes that stand out in the ISO 14001:2026 version is climate and environmental conditions, life cycle and value chain, and a stronger leadership and governance around management systems. Organizations are now expected to consider climate change, pollution, biodiversity, and resource availability explicitly in their context, their risks and opportunities, operational control, not just in a narrow sort of compliance and waste lens. The FDIS also clarifies life cycle expectations and supplier control, and it reinforces top management's obligations and accountability for EMS performance, which is a clear signal to boards and executives that the 2026 version is about strategy and governance. It's not just procedures.
Does the FDIS indicate that ISO 14001:2026 will align with the latest harmonised structure for ISO management system standards?
Yes, so the FDIS confirms that the standard continues to follow the ISO's harmonized structure, often referred to as Annex XL or the harmonized structure for management system standards. The revised text has been updated to reflect the latest Annex XL framework, which keeps the ISO 14001 aligned with other ISO standards like your 9001, 45001, and makes integrating management systems easier to design and audit. For organizations that are currently combining the 9, the 14, the 45 standards and systems, that alignment is a strong selling point. The 2026 version will fit naturally into integrated management systems, architectures, and support streamlined multi-standard audits.
For organisations already certified to ISO 14001:2015, what does the FDIS signal in practical terms? Should they be worried about any major changes?
Look, for 2015 certified organizations, the 2026 version, the FDIS version, is a clear signal that expectations are rising. It's not a wholesale reset of your environmental management system. The FDIS confirms that there is a 3-year transition window after publication, so there is time to plan, but it also shows where effort will need to increase. Most sources describe the changes as moderate and evolutionary rather than radical. Um, so if your 2015 system is genuinely embedded and risk-based, you shouldn't have to panic. But you should expect to tighten how you evidence decisions, governance, and value change control. The smartest way to prepare for the 2026 version is to treat the FDIS as a high confidence preview. It's not the final legal text. Use it to shape your strategy, but don't rewrite every procedure until the actual standard is published. Practically, that means, build awareness of the new themes, review your aspects, risks, governance against those themes, map likely gaps, and start a structured transition plan that you can fine tune once ISO 14001:2026 is actually officially released. It's also a good time to upskill your internal teams, environmental managers, internal auditors, and leadership. So when the new version lands, your organization is already talking the language of climate resilience, recycling and life cycle responsibilities, and environmental governance.
We also know that ISO 9001 is being revised this year. For organisations certified to both ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, what's the best way to navigate both revisions without duplicating effort?
Good question. The best strategy is to think in terms of an integrated management system transition rather than two separate projects. Both revisions are expected to stay aligned to the harmonized structure, the Annex SL that I spoke about earlier, with stronger focus on risks and opportunity, supply chain oversight, governance, external expectations, which creates a lot of shared content that you can update once and use across the management systems. In practice, that means building a single transition roadmap, covering the ISO 9001 and the 14001, updating common elements, and then layering a standard specific requirement where needed. For multi-certified organizations, this integrated approach will reduce the duplication, streamline audits, and it makes it easier to tell a joined-up story about quality, about your environmental performance and sustainability to customers and to your stakeholders.
If organisations take one thing away from the release of the FDIS, what should it be?
If there's one takeaway from this FDIS release, I guess it's this. Don't wait for the final cover page to start acting. The FDIS shows you where the environmental expectations are heading. Climate, the life cycle, supplies and governance. I mean, it gives you a rare early warning window before the new version and standard makes it mandatory. So use the FDIS as your roadmap. If you get ahead of the changes now, the transition won't just protect your certificate, it will sharpen your environmental performance and credibility for years to come.
That's fantastic, Nicole. So insightful and really timely and relevant. So I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much, Nicole.
No problem. Thank you for spending some time with me.